Hey, folks, and welcome back to another bonus episode. This week, I am talking to my friend Bruce Tate. Now, Bruce, we're going to be talking about your book, 7 Languages in 7 Weeks. I actually have a copy right here. Now, the reason I invited you on, and I'll let you introduce yourself here in a minute, is because we're doing it for our book club book. And so if you want to pick up 7 Languages in 7 Weeks, you can come and join the fun. Bruce has actually agreed to come to some of the calls. I don't know exactly what the schedules look like as far as when he can make it, but yeah, looking forward to just talking through some of this stuff. And yeah, you were also one of the panelists on Elixir Mix a while back. And yeah, what else are y'all doing? I know you run Groxio as well. Why don't you go ahead and just introduce yourself instead of me doing it?
Yeah, my name is Bruce, and I've been an editor in the Elixir community for a while. I've taken a step back from that, but I still write books from time to time. I'm working with another one of those Elixir mixers, Sophie Di Benedetto,
Mm-hmm.
and that's Programming Phoenix Live View, so that's exciting. Have a couple
Oh,
of things
nice.
happening. There is a conference coming up, and that is called Gig City Elixir. And Gig City Elixirs in Chattanooga, Tennessee. That runs in let me I should have prepared the dates, but let's see. It is May 19th through the 21st, I believe. Or actually
Oh, wow,
the
that's coming
18th through
up.
the 20th. That's coming up, right? And so like a lot of conferences, we've been down for a while through the whole COVID scare.
Mm-hmm.
And we're meeting again in person, so that feels pretty good. And would appreciate any kind of support that your audience has. I'm sure that there's some Elixir coders there, and maybe some new budding Elixir coders. You know, the book doesn't talk about Elixir explicitly, but it talks about some of the
Right.
languages that inspired Elixir, and actually through this book itself.
Nice. Yeah, and I think Elixir's in 7 more languages in 7 weeks, if I remember.
It is. It is.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's in Erlang, which is kind of the model underneath it
Uh-huh.
all, is in there
Right.
as well. And it has, the macros from Clojure, it has the
Mm-hmm.
syntax of Ruby, and it has the actor-based model in Scala and a lot of them really, and kind of those prologue roots as well. So, it's pretty
Yep.
cool.
Good deal. So, just to kind of get things rolling, I'm a little curious what inspired the book. I mean, 7 languages, especially in 7 weeks, it seems kind of intense.
Yeah, and I think you can kind of tell that the language is tongue in cheek. You're
Right.
not going to learn 7 languages in 7 weeks,
Right.
especially. Well, I mean, you might learn them well enough to put on a resume, but
Uh-huh.
but but it's really what you're going to do
Right.
is just get a glimpse of the soul of 7 different languages. And at the time, I wasn't planning on writing any kind of book about this. I just had a sense that things were moving and changing. And this was in
Mm-hmm.
2010. So we're a couple of years after the paper, The Free Lunch is Over. And that's the
Mm-hmm.
one where I started to look around and some of the cool kids that I was following were leaving the room and going somewhere else to play.
Right.
And I said, gosh, what's happening? And it turns out that the free lunch is over. When I read it, I said, "Oh gosh, the processors are getting, more and
Mm-hmm.
more compact to where we can't shrink them down anymore. We're kind of, from a physics standpoint, we're out of room, so we have to
Right.
stack the processors up like plates in a pantry. And now it's not. We're trying to optimize something different. We're not trying to
Mm-hmm.
optimize the memory footprint anymore. We're trying to optimize concurrency." And
Right.
so when I saw that those things were changing, I was afraid that I'd kind of jumped on the wrong horse.
Mm.
And in a dead panic, started to do some research. And then some of my friends told me, well, you should bring some people along with you.
Right.
And, gosh, I hadn't used any functional languages at the time. And so that was a scary thing, but we'll get to that conversation a little later.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I mean, it's definitely interesting, and I remember kind of getting to that point with some of the things that were out there, and we've seen a lot of languages updating their concurrency models and stuff like that since 2010, and so yeah, it's definitely a world that's changing. I'm kind of curious. Then, is that how you picked some of the languages that are in here, like Erlang, for example? Right? It has a very interesting concurrency model. I'm not as familiar, honestly, with like IO or Prolog or some of the other ones in here, but
Yeah, so you caught my dirty secret. All the books in the seven language kind of group, or the 7 and 7
hmm
kind of that line of books, they tell a story, right? So
okay.
it isn't, you know, let's have a vote, right? Let's
hmm
see what people want to see, and then kind of build a table of contents based on that. What I was really trying to do was get from a very dynamic, very object oriented language
hmm
and into some different territories in ways that weren't going to break my brain too hard, right? And
Right.
so I got from all the way from Ruby, which is interpreted, dynamic,
hmm
very much object oriented. And then we kind of moved through this prototype oriented. So we're kind of drifting away from object oriented into more concurrent. Then we had prologue, which were kind of drifting away from the imperative and more to the declarative, which means
hmm
it's kind of the way that you want people to work with you. Rather than giving you a list of tasks, they just tell you what to do
Right.
and let you figure it out, right? So that's an imperative language. And then I take that through a number of different type models and then a number of
hmm
different kind of the core thing of the language is different. And so what you have is a narrative that gets a typical programmer to understanding what the core issues are when you're
hmm
going from object oriented to functional programming languages.
That makes sense. And I mean, some of these languages I'm definitely interested in learning more about. I mean, Scala, Erlang, Clojure, those have all, I think, grown in popularity in the last several years. I still don't see a lot of people writing Haskell, but I know that they've grown. I just don't think they've grown like the other languages have, and so it's kind of interesting to see that progression. But um, yeah. So when if I'm getting into this book, let's say I pick it up and I decide I want to read it, or you come to the book club, right? topendevs.com/book club. If you come to the book club and you're like, okay, well, what do I need to know? What do I need to do to prepare to go through this book? And we're going to do it in 8 weeks, right? Kind of set the stage and then go through each language. But yeah, how do I prepare? How do I start thinking about the approach to this book?
I think the main thing is to let go of your expectations, right? So you're not
hmm
going to, if you're anything like I was, then you're not going to be ready for all of the ideas that are going to come at you and how
Right.
quickly they're going to come at you. And um, so I think probably the preparation is to let go of expectations and just kind of get excited, kind of read a little bit about the ones that you're most excited about and find out the buzz about what has you excited.
hmm
And I have a couple of suggestions of what a non-trivial problem looks like in each one.
Right.
And some of mine are kind of awful now. Like I kind of cringe when I look at the Haskell chapter. Some
Right.
of the languages might be a little bit harder to play with. Like IO is an
hmm
example. IO was done for a reason, right? It's a minimalist prototype oriented language. And I wanted to kind of touch on the ideas in JavaScript because JavaScript can
hmm
be written in a much more functional way,
Right.
but you can't attack something like JavaScript in just 30, 35 pages. So I didn't
Right.
try. Um, but yeah, so I think that probably probably what you need to do is just kind of relax and and think of what gets you excited about each one.
hmm That makes sense. One other thing that I've kind of picked up on some of this, and it kind of harkens back a little bit to pragmatic programmers, where they said to learn a new programming language every year, right? Um, as I've kind of picked up other languages, gotten involved in other ecosystems, I still primarily write code in Ruby. But I found that those different approaches, the different conversations, the different ways of thinking about things, in these other languages has changed the way that I write code in a language that I've used for like 18 years now. And so, what kinds of things do you think people are going to see and learn and grow in as they work through the book?
First, let me say that Ruby will always have a part of my heart.
Mm-hmm.
The idea that the culture and the kindness that Matt's built,
Mm-hmm.
the whole concept of doing things because they feed your soul, right?
Mm-hmm.
Treating people the right way because it feeds your soul. That's
Right.
gosh, it has left a mark on me.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how you can make a language to code computers with soul and with kindness, but Matt's did it.
Right.
And gosh, I find myself tearing up thinking about all the kindnesses that Matt's gave
Mm-hmm.
me. Like even gosh, writing this book and talking about um, other languages that I approached him, asked him, "Would you like to answer some questions for this book?" And he said, "Sure." And he's
Mm-hmm.
always been so good and kind to me. And I think that that's really some of the kinds of things that you'll find when you undertake a journey, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
an unexpected one for me, if I could take us off track again
Mm-hmm.
and into a personal story that probably some of your readers have heard. But one of the things that happened when I wrote Seven Languages in 7 Weeks, or when I started writing the book, was that, you know, I wasn't ready to write this book because I had a pretty isolated worldview that it was,
Mm-hmm.
Java and Ruby and other object-oriented languages. And I
Right.
started getting off of this track pretty much immediately, from Ruby to I skipped IO at first, got
Mm-hmm.
into Prolog and Erlang, and was really in over my head.
Right.
And my publisher said, we should start getting this thing out for review. And I was thinking, oh man, do we have to, right? Because
Right.
you don't want to write
Yeah.
about things that you don't know about. You want to write about things
Right.
that make you look smart. And so it turns out that my publisher said, well, I know that you have your set of Ruby developers, but let me throw in a
Right.
couple of other ones. And so I said, that's cool. And so she said, well, I sent him out to review, didn't think of it. And I got a note that came back that said, your first review. And, I saw this, just started turning pages and there was red ink.
Uh-huh.
I said, "Oh boy, I'm really,
Right.
So it's, but it was weird because I saw Ruby was blank,
Uh-huh.
then I saw Erlang next,
Uh-huh.
and the comment that I zeroed in on was just this big long one that says, "I get the sense that this author understands Erlang very well," and I didn't, right?
Uh-huh.
It'll become clear why I said that shortly, but he said, I don't get the same sense for Prologue. And then
Right.
just completely shredded the Prologue chapter.
Uh-huh.
And I said, what have I gotten myself into? And then I flipped back at the note to see who actually wrote the comments. It was Joe Armstrong, the
Oh,
creator of
wow.
Erlang. And he has, he's basically said, his first love may not even be Erlang. It's probably
Right.
Prolog. He loves Prolog, right?
Uh-huh.
So anyway, Joe coached me through Prolog,
Oh,
right?
wow.
And the reason that the examples that I wrote resonated with Joe was that I based them on Joe's examples, right? So he said,
Oh, right.
"This is the most brilliant Erlang that I've ever seen." He's like, "It's
Uh-huh.
yours, Joe. It's yours,
Yeah, it's your code.
right. And so, I kind of grabbed the core ideas and structured
Uh-huh.
the syntax the same way and everything. But anyway, in Prolog, he said, you're trying to do too much. And let's try to solve a problem. Well, let's try to solve two problems. First, let's do the map coloring problem. So we did that,
Uh-huh.
and it was kind of a toy problem, but very beautiful.
Right.
And the prologue description is basically you say, these dates are different colors, and these colors are different from each other, and now, spit out the formulas that build a collection of states that
Right.
don't connect to each other, right? And essentially it does it, and I say, that's cool, and I'm being polite, and I'm just stone cold terrified. And then I'm connected with Joe, and we're working with the Sudoku problem,
Right.
and which I thought was appropriate because we started the book in Japan. That's like a Japanese word problem, and to kind of connect to the languages and things. So
Right.
But Joe says, okay, so you have a good foundation here. You've established the rules. And I said, what do I do next? He says, well, just see what happens. And then so I ran what I had so far, and it spits out the answer. And I'm stone cold silent, and Joe Armstrong is laughing, right? He's laughing. He says, now you've had your prologue moment, and you can talk about this language. Now we are prologue brothers, So he's just laughing and just hamming it up. And so that's the kind of experience that can happen when you take I just took this long boat ride.
Right.
And one of the experts is called the Great Loop. So we basically circled the eastern United States plus parts of Canada.
Right.
And one of the experts told us, you have to get off the magenta line, that line that goes right down the middle of your GPS, right? It's the intercoastal waterway, and that's basically maps things for us. He says, get off that magenta line. And that's what Joe was telling me. He was saying, get off that magenta line, start exploring, doing non-trivial things. And, you're going to be frustrated, but you're also going to find joy if you're open to the experience. And
Right.
and I was, and I did. And gosh, I met people in writing that book that I probably wouldn't have met any other way. And changed the trajectory of my career for sure.
Yep. That's really cool. Yeah, you're the analogy, right, of getting off the magenta line. I think that kind of embodies what this book is about too, where it's just, it's real easy to stay on your path, right? It's okay, well, I could do Ruby forever, right? I don't have to branch out, and I wouldn't have to, but I've met awesome people in these other communities because I've gotten involved. And it sounds like you had a pretty similar experience there.
Yeah, very much so. Very much. There's been so many kindnesses along the way. I remember, the result of all this research in 7 languages was that, I wanted to find a language that was after Ruby, and to me, it didn't. None of them actually clicked in the way that I hoped that they would.
Right.
And one of the things that did happen was that other people were embarking on the same journey at the same time. So that's why it became popular. It's just a timing thing. A lot of us were kind of looking at what was next, and one of the people who was looking was Jose Valim.
Jose, yep.
And Jose, basically, one of his bits of research, his stops of research along the way was 7 languages in 7 weeks. And he said, gosh, I saw Erlang, and I saw that that supervisor model on top of it, and it was just shining. Yeah. And so you never know what kinds of relationships these types of journeys can kind of bring to you.
Yeah, for the listener who's not familiar, Jose Valim is somebody that I think you and I both initially know from the Ruby community, who created the Elixir programming language, which is built on top of the Erlang virtual machine and some of the other underlying things that make it run. So
yeah,
I think that's really cool.
And if you're one of these Ruby people who has dipped your toe in the Elixir water, I'm going to say that again because my dog was yipping.
It's all good.
So if you're one of the people in the Ruby community who's dipped your toe in the water a couple of times,
Hmm.
you'll notice a lot that was in the languages in this book.
Right.
Probably more because we were both doing the exploration at the same time with different
Hmm.
goals in mind. You'll see macros like the ones in Closure. You'll see OTP like
Hmm.
the OTP in Erlang, which is kind of the model for processes
Right.
and concurrency. You'll see the syntax from Ruby. It'll be very
Yep.
familiar to you. And if you're in the Closure community, you'll also see something common. And if you're in the Haskell community, you'll see something common, like the math
Hmm.
behind the lazy streams. It's very similar. In fact, a lot of the a lot of the math that is how the streams are unified
Hmm.
across the different collections and the lazy and eager came right out of Haskell.
That's cool.
Yeah, so you'll find something you're familiar with.
Hmm. Good deal. So one other thing that I'm curious. So did you come up with this list of languages right off the bat, or was it something you kind of evolved to?
Well, there were a number of languages that everybody wanted to see.
Right.
I would put Haskell on that list.
Hmm.
Erlang was a little bit down that list, but was on it for most people. Most people wanted to see Python, but I knew Ruby better, and I didn't want
Hmm.
to spend my time in that kind of research.
Right.
JavaScript was on everybody's list at the time, 2010, right? It makes a lot of
Right.
sense. People were
Yep.
starting to write some object oriented code, but they were starting to nose in the more functional direction. And
Hmm.
JavaScript is a great language for doing some of that because of its
Yep.
prototype capabilities. So some of them weren't on anybody's list.
Hmm.
Like IO wasn't on anybody's list,
Right.
but I needed to fill the prototype slot. And probably if I were to do it again, maybe I would pick IO again just because it's so beautiful and minimalist.
Right.
But also, Lua would have been a really good fit for
Hmm.
that kind of discussion. It's also prototype oriented, has a lot of cool um, uses. So building something non-trivial in that language will be a lot of fun now.
Right.
Um, yeah, and but most of the languages that people wanted to see, like people wanted to see Lisp, they probably
Hmm.
mentioned four or five of them, and I settled on Closure. I thought it made
Hmm.
a lot of sense at the time, and still do.
Right.
Um, so yeah, most of the languages were the popular ones, and then you kind of layer that over the story that you want to tell.
Right.
And the story is that running out of space on the chip. So some of us
Right.
are going to have to move based on the problems that we're trying to solve, and I was one of them, right? So
Hmm.
it turns out that if you're a Java developer and you're worried about concurrency, well, there are a lot of cool things that are happening now that weren't happening
Hmm.
back when I wrote the book, right? So the
Yep.
structured concurrency that Brian Getz is working on, for example, that's really cool
Hmm.
stuff. But that wasn't around back at the time. So
Right.
what I needed was a story arc to match my research, and that's what I strove to do.
Very, very cool. So, it looks like there's a specific structure to like each language. Like just flipping through it, I'll admit I haven't read it yet. Um, but there's like day one, day two, day three. Um, what's kind of the structure for each language? Like, what are you walking me through?
Yeah, so it's just 3 days. The first day is familiarity, and it's typically in a REPL if there is one for the language.
Hmm.
And the last day is doing something non-trivial in the language, and
Right.
then the other day is in between. But I didn't want to fill 7 days because we don't
Right.
we don't code every day. We also
Right.
need time to play. So you have to
Hmm.
build that into such a hypothetical schedule, which is really just
Right.
hypothetical anyway. We've already established you can't learn seven languages
Right.
in 7 weeks. But yeah, so that's the idea. Kind of get familiar. Um, so maybe write a small program, then write a non-trivial program. I think that would probably
Right.
be a pretty good a pretty good goal for each week.
Makes sense. Is this the same process you would recommend to somebody who wanted to learn a language that's not in the book? Kind of
Yeah,
get the basics, write a
so
trivial program, non-trivial. Yeah.
I played with this model with the Groxio company, right? So I played
Uh-huh.
with the model of saying, you know what, learn languages, and if you do, you'll be a better programmer,
Mm-hmm.
even if you're working with languages that you never touch in your professional day-to-day job, right?
Right.
I still believe that's true. I
Mm-hmm.
don't believe you can get people to buy the concept, though. Well, I can't. Maybe somebody can. Maybe somebody can. But yeah. So I'll say again: come at the problem with curiosity when you want to learn
Mm-hmm.
a language.
Yeah.
And so basically, spend the early few, I don't know, days, hours, just kind of reading and becoming familiar with what the trope, right? The
Mm-hmm.
kind of the traditional problem solved in the language. With Ruby, it's the blog. With Elixir, it's a chat room.
Mm-hmm.
And then kind of then so solve that problem, and then take steps in the direction of kind of the sweet spot of the language. And for Elixir, that is concurrency that normally takes the form of something like live view, right? Which is interactive pages and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so in Haskell, it probably has something to do with types and monads. Maybe it's a
Right.
maze solver. With Prolog, it would be some type of a logic constraint problem, right? I
Mm-hmm.
have this many teams and this many holidays and these
Right.
constraints, and try to find a schedule that'll fill all those, right? So
Yep.
yeah, that's how I'd say attack the problem. It's find the trope, right? The stuff
Mm-hmm.
that everybody is saying, everybody's doing. And write something simple, then write something non-trivial. And if you're excited, learn more. If you're not,
Yep.
move on.
All right. Cool. Is there anything else that you think we ought to know about this book, or any other stories you want to tell us?
Let's see about the book. I don't necessarily think so. Stories. Let's we'll save some for another time.
Okay.
But I would like to put in another plug for
Mm-hmm.
7 languages in 7 weeks. If you want to play with Elixir, um, and this is a good language for people who are interested in the 7 languages in 7 weeks concept, but don't necessarily know the language yet. It's a great language
Mm-hmm.
that builds in many of the different concepts in the book. If you want to play with that, Groxio is a great platform for doing so. So you can,
Mm-hmm.
um, gosh, you could even dive in and find a non-trivial problem for weeks and weeks and weeks. If you're into this idea of just learning to learn, of taking an
Mm-hmm.
afternoon and kind of doing something that hurts your brain a little bit, right?
Yep.
Kind of working through the concurrency models. Try to build something with OTP. Try to solve a mastermind game or a maze solver or the game of
Mm-hmm.
life or something like that. So Groxio is a great way to do that. I want to put in another plug for the conference that we have going on. That's Gig City Elixir, and that
Mm-hmm.
is May 19th and 20th, and I think we have a training day on the 18th. And we really pride ourselves on great hospitality, and
Mm-hmm.
we try to help some underrepresented populations by giving away tickets for people who might not normally have a voice. So I think it's a good way to do it. It's
Yep.
we don't have to be super politically active or anything like that. We could just offer this service for people who don't necessarily have a voice. So we do a lot of that. we'll give away as many as 10 to 20% of our tickets. So
Oh, wow.
if you like that idea, come along. We'll have the creator of Nerves, we'll have the creator of the Ash framework, and I'll be speaking as well. And so, yeah. And then the last plug is, if you're interested in this idea of the Great Loop that we talked about, we will be publishing a book a little bit later. It's in the final pieces of the production process. The book is going to be titled Currently Away. And so this is the first time I've announced that.
Oh, cool. Got the scoop here. And I'm just going to remind people we're going to have Bruce along for some of our calls. We do them on Tuesday mornings at 9 o'clock Mountain Time. I think that's 11 o'clock Eastern Time. I've had some people say, well, why don't you do it after work? But it seems like a good number of the people who want to be involved are in Europe. And doing it in the evening in the U.S. just makes it really hard for them to do it because it gets late at night. So that's why we do it at 9 in the morning. But yeah, look forward to having you along, Bruce, and look forward to having anybody who wants to join in. And you can just go sign up at topenddevs.com/book club. And yeah, I'm on the calls. We've got a handful of other people that show up every week, and it'll be fun. So feel free to join in.
And I'll definitely make a session or two.
All right. Sounds good. Well, let's go ahead and wrap it up. Thanks again for coming. And until next time, folks, Max out.